I really picked the wrong time to film this because in the evening the sun comes into my room and it turns it into a sauna and it's just beginning and I just started filming. Welcome to Jugni with Prabhleen. I'm your host, Prabhleen. Welcome to my bedroom floor. I just felt like this was the most appropriate place for me to start my podcast, and this was the perfect time. I'm sitting in my room on my bedroom floor, and my mattress is bare. She's a little naked. We're exposing the matty. My sheets are in the wash. And, I just figured, no need to cover this up. No need to, rush and wash the sheets faster. If you're going to come in to my bedroom, you're going to have to get used to these kinds of things. I don't know anything about podcasting. This is my first podcast episode that I filmed solo. I was kind of debating whether I wanted to do solo episodes or not. I knew I definitely wanted to interview people. That's really where it started from. But I figured, honestly, I'm such a yapper. I'm yapping on TikTok all the time. So I might as well actually do it on something that's made for yapping, like podcasting. I feel like there's just so many things to talk about right now. First of all, for anyone who isn't watching the video, I'm wearing my Diljit shirt, this overpriced shirt I paid way too much for at his concert, but whatever, vibes, experience, memories. I just went to the Diljit concert 2 days ago, so I'm still reeling from all that. I'm watching the videos back again and again because he was just phenomenal. The energy in the stadium was phenomenal. All of it was just, yes. So what I'm going to be talking about, I mean, this podcast will probably be talking about, the same things that I kind of talk about on my TikTok, just way more. I'm obsessed with TikTok like anyone my age is nowadays. And what I love about TikTok is that every single person has their own little TikTok world, right? Everyone's For You page is catered to them. Sometimes I'll be talking to my friends and I'll be like, oh my God, have you seen this one? And they're like, no, because that's not what's popular in their TikTok world. They're not always on Punjabi TikTok like I am. So my TikTok world right now, or my TikTok world generally, because this is what I just love talking about, is South Asian fashion. And there's so much going on right now with South Asian fashion. Okay, I'm going to say this. South Asian culture is going to be the next cultural wave. I've been saying this for a couple years. I feel like we're really starting to see it now, especially coming from the Diljit concert. 50,000 people in Toronto, and it was insane. Everyone and their mom was there. Last big wave that we had was Black culture, American Black culture, and everyone was trying to act Black. All the dance trends and everything were kind of coming from Black culture. Not that we don't still see that, but I feel like the next big wave is South Asian culture, Desi culture, because there's so much immigration, especially in Canada, but also in the States, and in Australia. There's so much immigration from India, from South Asia, from Pakistan, from all, Sri Lanka, all these areas in South Asia. You're starting to see the diaspora just get even bigger than it already is. And you can feel it. The Ambani wedding is happening right now, or just happened. I don't know. When is it going to be over? It is a circus at this point, but that's definitely feeding into it because now everybody and their mom is dressing up in South Asian clothes. Honestly, I think I need an entire episode dedicated to the Ambanis to talk about the Ambani wedding because it is a circus and it's so clearly PR. There's no confirmation, right? But Kim Kardashian and Khloe Kardashian, they got paid to come, right? It's also I don't even know if it's over yet. The funniest thing about the Kardashians being there is every story that Khloe and Kim were putting up, they were using Punjabi MC's Mundian to Bach Ke Rahi, and it was so funny. It was hilarious. They just, clearly just found the most popular Indian song they know of that is used in every movie to introduce an Indian character. That's such a massive indicator of how little people understand South Asia and the culture and the fashion and just like all those things around that area. Like I remember looking in the comments of some of these videos and they're like, well, what's wrong with that? Like they're using an Indian song for an Indian wedding. Like, wow, not everybody in South Asia or India are the same. Like there's so many different cultures. There's like cultures within cultures in that subcontinent. That's what you don't understand. And that's why it's funny because it shows like the ignorance of those people, but it's also a little racist. Yeah, honestly, I think the Kardashians, they seemed psyched. Like they seemed psyched to be there. They dressed, the dresses were great. I didn't look too deep into exactly what they were wearing and like who made it and everything, but from what I generally know, they were sourcing it from like South Asian fashion brands and artists and stuff, which is good. Like that's who you should be, using that from. But honestly, I know for a fact that they're just happy that they get to wear all these clothes and not be like, witch hunted online or canceled online for cultural appropriation. Kim's known to do that. Like she's worn the tikka multiple times and I think she got like called up for it. In this case, no one's going to be like, "Oh, cultural appropriation." They're at an Indian wedding in India. I feel like this is the perfect segue into my next topic, and I have been meaning to talk about this for a while now. So, for those of you who don't, follow me on TikTok, let me give you guys context and then we'll move into it. Basically, Rose Kaur is a Punjabi stylist. She works in the industry and she makes videos about style and fashion and things like that, usually showing her outfits. She was attending a Indian wedding and showing her outfits, but she wasn't using the correct names for them. And so, of course, people called her out, and then it sparked this discussion about why it was important for us to be using appropriate names when referring to like South Asian fashion. And so I chimed in. I literally said it in the start. I'm like, I'm going to make one video talking about my opinions on that. I'm going to save that video for later, right? But for now, what I want to talk about is just South Asian fashion vocabulary, because it occurred to me that there's a lot of people that don't really know all these names, especially that have been in the diaspora. So I was like, like learning opportunity. So I just went through her videos and just explained really quickly the terminology of like different South Asian pieces of fashion. And if you know me and you know the content that I make, I tend to go really deep into the history of different types of fashion. Like I have a series on TikTok, it's called The History of Fashion, and that's what I do. And I was saving my opinions video for this podcast. There's so much that I want to say. So this is kind of late, and I'm not trying to like resurrect the entire controversy or like dragging it. Like people always feel like, "Oh, you're dragging it." We should be talking about these things in the community. And like if this is like a little bit of catalyst for us to talk about this, why not? Obviously I don't want us to like focus on the witch hunt aspect of it and start targeting a certain person. It's just all of us, I feel like, can relate to different aspects of this. Personally, I think it's obvious. She should not be calling a lehenga a skirt. The thing about South Asian culture is that each item of clothing, each piece of jewelry has so much history behind it. It has so much significance behind it. And preserving the name is one way to preserve kind of the link to that history. The names hold so much value. And I know this because I research all of these. Half of my little nuggets of information that I find are purely just from the names. The names themselves will just have like Persian origin or, just random different origins. And just through that, you can kind of trace where these things came down to South Asia from. And that's why I feel so strongly about it, because if you know anything about South Asian jewelry and culture, it wasn't always as simple as like, oh, we're just adorning ourselves. We love to adorn ourselves, of course, but each piece of jewelry holds significance. It holds some kind of story, some kind of tradition about a group of people. And those groups of people were our ancestors. And so I think that's why I love history of fashion. I love South Asian fashion and I love talking about it, is because I find that so cool. Like these were people who I'm probably related to distantly in some way. This kind of goes back to this one comment someone left on the video. Let me find that. This is the cool part about this kind of like style of doing this. You guys have already commented your thoughts and your opinions. Navdeep Mahal, he said, "We speak with confidence because the generation before us cleared the path for us." Exactly. Like, I don't know. I'm not really sure the intention behind that comment, whether he was trying to like argue against what I was saying or for, but that is so true. Like the generations before us cleared this path for us. So we kind of owe it to them, in my opinion, to preserve at least their stories and their histories and keep telling them and keep passing them down, because I get it. The clothes are beautiful and like you love wearing them and all these things, but like what makes them even more beautiful is when you know the stories behind them. So ultimately, if you're using whatever westernized name for it, you're gonna completely remove that. And like if that becomes norm, we're gonna lose that. So that is one reason. And then the other reason is people were like, oh, well, she's just making it digestible for her audience. It's just making it easier for them to understand. I just don't understand why it needs to be easier for them. She's showing a video of herself wearing it, you know? If it was like a podcast, like an audio only kind of thing like this, okay, maybe I get it. So I don't really understand that whole like simplifying it for anybody because, okay, so I'm already planning on doing like a TikTok covering this creator. I saw some of her videos where she's going to an Indian wedding of one of her friends, and she did like an entire haul showing like all of the clothes that she got and what she's thinking of wearing to like which event. But it was awesome to see because she was a white woman, clearly. I'm sure she doesn't have any of these items of clothing already. She just like cares enough to like do the research, find these things, and then she's sharing it and she's using all the correct terminology. So it's like, okay, so if she can do it and she's not even from South Asian descent, then why can't South Asians in the diaspora do that? Right? Why do we feel the need to simplify this or quote unquote simplify this? And like, why is that considered simpler? Obviously, I'm hinting at colonization, like that being like the norm or the standard. Why does that automatically translate to simpler? So I think that like that's a huge thing to think about because I feel like we in the diaspora definitely need to reframe the way that we look at things. I'm not trying to be devil's advocate here. However, I want to look at the situation from all angles. Obviously, overall, I agree. South Asian fashion clothing names are really important. However, one thing I think that we all need to keep in mind is that the diaspora is huge. And I don't just mean in like size, it's huge in size too, but I mean like in time, in decades. I know my sister-in-law's family came here in the 80s. There's people in her family that came here in the 70s. So there's some people here that have been here for generations. And if you know anything about South Asian culture and the way that we pass information down to each other, I complain about this all the time. We're not great at documenting things. When you look at history, if you were the one that documented it, you get the credit or something, right? So South Asians are not that great at that. I think the culture that we come from, it's more like you kind of pass it down from generation to generation. There's no formal record keeping of these kinds of things. So even what we learn about our culture, it's from the family we have around us. And if you're lucky to have community and family around you, then that's amazing. Because then, you know, you have grandparents and uncles and great aunts and all these people who have this experience to pass down to you, all this information to pass down to you. However, if you've been here for generations, naturally, you don't have as much of that. When people immigrate, they just kind of bring what they bring at that time. Like they're frozen. Like if they came, you know, to Canada from India in the 70s, then they just remember everything about India from the 70s. It's like frozen for them, even if India back there is like progressing and moving forward. When parts of the South Asian diaspora first immigrated, they were the first people in these communities in the Western world. They didn't have the privilege of the community that we have. Like I'm raised in Brampton, and we have a huge South Asian community, and I'm so lucky, and I think about that all the time. I'm so lucky to have that because I don't feel uncomfortable wearing a suit when I go out. I have so many South Asian friends my age. And I feel like we have to keep that in mind because you don't want to shame people for how they coped and survived. Because back then it was a different world. And even now, there's certain areas where there's a really, really low population of like South Asian people. So people don't have that community and they're going to try to assimilate, especially kids, you know? They're going to try to assimilate to the people around them because they don't want to be made fun of. And what I love about the comments was that there were so many people that really related to that. Like, let me see if I can find some comments here. One person, Anna, she said, "This was actually so helpful as someone from the Indian diaspora where no Indian language was able to be passed down." Oh, there's one girl, Jezzy. "Girl, my parents left India in 1950, dad's side, and 1880, mom's side. I love this education." That's crazy. 1880? Guys, that's insane. When these families were immigrating way back when, they're coming here and they don't have community. They don't have a lot of family in these places and they're going to go to this new country. So like immigration itself is hard enough already. Expecting people to completely be able to preserve their culture and pass it generations down like perfectly is it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous expectation. Of course, they couldn't do everything. And we don't want to make them feel bad for that either. Another point I want to make is that there's some immigration, like indentured laborers, for example, like the circumstances under which it happened doesn't necessarily create the easiest method or way for these people to have preserved their culture. So to see the ways in which they have preserved their culture, to the degrees to which they have preserved their culture, considering all of the things that were against them, is so amazing. And they developed, you know, almost like fusions of those cultures in those specific areas. And like to me that's just like really cool and exciting, and I know to some people that's scary because like the culture is changing, like they're worried that they're going to lose it, but like to me it is so exciting to see that. It's a privilege for us to have community here and to feel like we know all these things and comfortable about all these things. Someone commented, they said, "Just a thought, do we think she's doing this on purpose to gatekeep the traditional clothes?" Total speculation, by the way. So no, I don't think she's doing this on purpose. I think there's just like an entire history of this we don't understand. And that's what I wanted to kind of make sure we all keep in mind. We don't know Rose Kaur's story, you know? We don't know her family's story, everything else. Clearly, she's had a long career already in the fashion industry. So there's just so much that we don't know. However, her being, you know, of South Asian descent in the fashion industry for this long, I think it's even more important for her to use the correct terminology so that she represents South Asian fashion appropriately. There's this one comment which I think kind of like is a great point, by It's Meg. "This breakdown is spot on. We're not in 1990s anymore when our culture was mocked and degraded relentlessly. Now most people are culturally aware." That's true. And I feel like what we want to do is we want to make progress. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever, we didn't have such big community, such big cultural awareness. We didn't have access to the internet, all these kinds of things. Our culture kind of got lost in the mix of things. But now there is so much more. We, as in numbers, there's so much more of us, but also there's so much more access to like information, and like the internet is huge. It's not too late to learn, which is why I made that video, because I was just like, I don't want people to feel shameful about the fact that they don't really know, you know, the names of these things or what to call them. Like, it's not something that you were formally given an education on. Even Rose Kaur, like, she's 57, she talks about age and like how that affects style a lot on her page, and I think that this is just another opportunity for her, not let her age, you know, affect something like this. It's so important for us to create that kind of space online, you know, in our online communities, but like even in person. I know that there's some cousins or like family friends I have who don't speak Punjabi that well, and they get mocked and made fun of so much that they just stop trying. Because like, who wants to keep trying if every time you make a mistake when you're learning something new, someone's mocking you or making you feel bad about it? So I want us to create that kind of environment where we're like, okay, come back to your culture, and it's never too late to learn. And we're not going to create this kind of space where it's just like, well, how do you not know this? Like, what do you mean? Aren't you brown? Aren't you Punjabi? And this is something that I've noticed as a pattern, is that TikTok, especially, the demographic is very like Gen Z. What's the next generation, Alpha? I don't know if they're already on there, but it's very Gen Z. And what that means is that like these people, these kids, they tend to grow up in a more aware society. They have access to all of this information, right? And they're like chronically online. And so they will just go really, really intense, and they're very passionate in the comments section. And I don't want to say just them, because I know it's not just them. Nothing is that like black and white. And I feel like kids today don't realize how lucky they are. They almost think that like it's a given, or they don't understand. But yeah, like I said, I make these videos, I learn these things so I can learn, because I want to learn this stuff too, but also so that like we can help create a community to allow people to learn and make mistakes while learning, and not shame them, and like not shame them for what age they're starting at or how much they know. We want to be able to help them reach out to their community or feel comfortable enough to be in their community and make mistakes and learn from them, as long as they're willing to learn. Is my thing. If they're like Nikki Haley kind of type, like we don't even want them. Like you can keep them. One last point I wanted to make, which I think is so important to understand, is that like I made that video, right? If you guys go on my TikTok, you can see it. But basically, I'm talking about the names of these different pieces of jewelry, clothing, all these things based on what I know. And I am North Indian. And that's the thing about South Asia. It is huge. There's so many different languages spoken in South Asia. There's so many different cultures and like geographic areas. There is so much. And the names of these things are different in different areas. And that's it. So it's just like if I'm calling it, a chumka, for example, and in Tamil it's called a chimiki, that's completely acceptable. It is also a chimiki and it is also a chumka. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that there is diversity, like linguistic diversity, across South Asia itself. And I think for people that don't know much about South Asia, like the linguistic diversity is huge. Like, for example, Ambanis, they're Gujarati. I'm Punjabi. Those are both like generally northern India kind of area, right? I could not understand a word of Gujarati. I don't know what they're saying. If someone speaks to me in Gujarati, blank face. I don't know what you're saying. There are so many other languages in the subcontinent of South Asia. There's dialects of Punjabi, like I speak Punjabi. There's dialects of Punjabi that I cannot understand because they're so different. And like Punjab itself, it's huge, right? It goes into like, Pakistan and like all those areas. So it is so normal for someone to be speaking Punjabi to me, but I wouldn't know what they're saying because they're speaking a completely different dialect. So this isn't about being like, this is what you call this and that's what you call that. No, obviously not. It's about understanding those names for those pieces of clothing hold a lot of value, no matter what part of the subcontinent you're using the names for. Because, cultural exchange within the continent is very, very normal. Anyways, I feel like I can keep talking forever. When I started this, I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to talk for like an hour? And I have so much more I could talk about. I'm doing way more episodes for sure. So definitely look out for them. Comment down below. Join the discussion. I love discussing these kinds of things, and I feel like we need to create more safe spaces for us to be able to have these conversations in a productive manner. We're not really always trying to witch hunt someone, cancel someone, or like insult them in any way. Debate is sport to me. Like, I find it so fun. So comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's something that, a point that maybe I missed that I didn't think about. This is so funny. This is another comment someone left, which I thought was like So perfect. Delusion yourself said, do you have a YouTube? If not, you should really do more South Asian fashion content. Well, Delusion, guess what? No, I do have a YouTube. People don't know that. I have some videos on there that are kind of old, cringy to look at, but if you want to cringe, and have me be the subject of it, feel free to go binge those. But yeah, I'm posting more on YouTube. I'm doing more of these podcasts. I'm going to be doing interviews with other creatives to learn about their experiences in this, changing diaspora world that we have of creativity on social media, everything. There's so many different aspects to it. So I want to talk about all of it. I actually have my first interview already recorded. I'm going to be editing that, posting that soon. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in and listening to me yap, yap, yap. Follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube if you want to see like updates on the podcast content. I'm going to be posting YouTube first. And yeah, have a good rest of your day, you guys. Bye.